How are you?
I'm wonderful, and I really appreciate you making time to do this.
Not a problem.
I really do. And you really did your work. You did your homework on this. I mean, you really did. And I appreciate that because I've been in interviews where people barely know my name.
You have said that, you're born and raised in Atlanta, and given the time period, you became a teenager, found your way during the civil rights movement, right? So can you tell us about that firsthand experience, being a child during that time of change and upheaval and social reconstruction?
Absolutely. I am a product of this city, Atlanta, the Deep South, and I am old enough to remember the remnants of a segregated South. For instance, my mother's family is from Florence, South Carolina, and I have told the story at times. When I was a little girl, I probably wasn't even old enough to go to school yet, so maybe 4, right? Maybe not quite 5. And my grandmother literally turned her back for a second, and I wanted to know if the white water fountain tasted differently. And people kind of look at me, but I learned words very early on. I could obviously spell my name, but I knew how to I could read colored and I could read white, right? And so I was just curious. And so there were these little steps on the side of the water fountain to get up to the white water fountain. Of course, there was a color fountain over there, but I wanted to check the white water out. And these 2 boys literally knocked me down off the steps. And I was crying. And my grandmother came and scooped me up, but in my mind she was angry at me, what she didn't understand. So I was crying, and she looked around and she came to scoop me up, but she, in my mind, was angry with me. And so adult eyes, I look back on that and I realized that she was afraid for my life, and that I could have disappeared out of the back door of Sears and Roebuck that day, never to be seen again. And I didn't understand that. I thought, well, why isn't she mad at the little boys? Why is she upset with me? And so I have different recollections of growing up. And I also am very grateful because my parents were very clear about what we would and would not do. And so even after things were supposed to be segregated, we would drive to my grandparents' house in South Carolina, and they would tell us that the bathrooms weren't working when we came. And my dad would say, cut off the gas, just cut it off. I'm not spending my money here. Nor would he and my mother cross picket lines. And so we didn't get new stuff for Easter or whatever, because my father was very clear that we will not support institutions where we are not welcomed. And I appreciate that. Obviously I didn't understand it as well as I do as an adult looking back. And then there were these lovely times where I didn't know Dr. King was a world-renowned person who was out saving the world. I just knew he was Yoki and Marty's daddy, right? And I took piano lessons with the King children, and I love this story because we were doing this recital, and Yolanda and I were doing this piano recital. We didn't have no talent, like ding, 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 ding. And I remember him running in and being so upset that he had missed her recital. And my dad and mom, we were leaving, and he said, Yoki, would you play for me? And she did, and he turned to me and said, would you play for me too? And I tell that story that here's this man who, of course, I didn't appreciate the fact that he was this amazing leader, but that we often forget too that he was a father and that he loved his children. And I saw that. And so I was a part of that integration generation. I'll skip ahead. I was in high school and the Governor's Honors Program, right? And so I applied, right? I applied. And when it got down to race, I put human on there, just being a smarty. I put human on there, right? And I got chosen. Of course, I show up at the governor's mansion, and there's a segregationist in there. I mean, they were not expecting me. I don't know how, a fluke that I got in the program, the governor's honors, but anyway, I show up. And so just all these interesting things are happening. I was recruited to Ivy League schools because they needed to diversify, right? But I understand now that I brought them a gift. I brought them a gift. And that's what I tell young people. It wasn't like they were just doing me this huge favor, but I brought them a gift. And I was smart, and I took the attitude, I'm smart and I should be here. Okay, so let's fast forward to Emory, and I'm not going to make my answers so long in the future, but went to Emory Law School. I came back home, went to Emory Law School, and this professor challenged me. He said, my mother and her sisters and my grandmother and all the women in my family went to Mount Holyoke. They went to this prestigious Ivy League school. How did you get in? Well, first of all, that meant he had pulled my file. Let's start there, right? Right? I mean, for him to know where I'd gone to college. And in that split second, nothing but God. I was very calm. And I said, I applied. Next day in class, he called on me. He called on me the second question. The third grade told the class to put their hands down. And he went hard on me for 50 minutes until that bell rang. And I was determined not to crack. I was prepared. And when I finished, he slammed his book down and he ran. He just rushed out of the room. And the woke students in the class stood up and clapped. I applied. I deserve to be here. I may be black. There may be this whole thing of getting... When I'm in this door, you're going to be clear that I'm prepared and I am here. And you can't ignore that. And so I say all that to say that these experiences made me stronger. I had a father who told me, for as long as I can remember back, you can be anything in the world you want to be. So I never saw being a colored girl as a problem.
Right.
I didn't. And so I've been the first at a lot of things, and we can talk about that later. But I think that having grown up and having been through those experiences, having been called a nigga, and my mother said, no, they didn't. I'm like, my mommy had to have hurt them, I'm like about 8 years old. And so she says, no, they didn't, Glenda. And I wrote about this in one of my books. I said, but mommy, they did. Mommy, you had to hear them. They did. They called me a nigga. She said, no, they didn't, because that's not who you are. And that was a life lesson. Don't ever let anybody define who you are. And so I'm grateful for the parents that I have. I'm grateful for the community that I grew up in. I'm grateful for the teachers I had in school, because it fortified me for fights that I couldn't have anticipated later in my life that may have discouraged other people. But I was very clear about who I am and why I am where I am.
What was the inspiration for you to go to law school and all that good stuff?
Oh, let me tell you, look, I wasn't planning to go into law school. Let's be real clear. I mean, I'd like to be able to tell you some fancy story that I knew when I was 5 years old. I wanted to be a lawyer. No, absolutely not. That is not what happened. If you know anything about me, I'm going to keep it real. No, that is not what happened. So what happened was that I looked up and I thought, what in the world am I going to do with this degree in political science and history? So I worked for a year. And then I went back to law school, right? But when I went back to law school, I never planned on being a lawyer. I went back to law school to expand my options. And when I went to law school, I thought that my ideal job would be to head a global foundation and give wealthy people's money to things I believed in. That's what I thought. That's really what I thought. When I got there, I got bit by the litigation bug. And then the rest is kind of interesting. But that's not what I had planned to do. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the litigation bug, you joined Delta Airlines and you worked right around that timeline where the airport expanded. Delta began to assert themselves as this dominant force. And then right around that time, there's a guy named Maynard Holbrook Jackson Jr.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What was that era like?
Oh, right. So I was not at Delta when Maynard shut down the airport. But let's talk about this, okay. Right? Let's talk about this.
Let's go.
Because I don't know that people fully appreciate what that meant and what he did in terms of minority participation as contractors. He set a standard that we have not seen in this country. So what Maynard Jackson did, who gave me my first legal job, by the way, my first year after I finished my first year in law school, he only hired one legal intern every summer. And people say, oh, when you can't get it, you only have 1 year of law school, you're not going to get that. There are people, second year students. There were people literally, without exaggeration, who'd already finished law school, who are willing to defer their employment to just come to work for him that summer. People would have given their right pinky, right? And I'm glad I didn't listen to the naysayers. I applied again. That word keeps coming up in my life. Applied, and he hired me. Mm-hmm. So I had a real appreciation, like firsthand, of watching him. Enormous respect for that man. So what he did is that he said, there will be X percent of these contracts to build a new airport here in Atlanta, Georgia, that must go to minority contractors. And they thought he was bluffing, and they called his bluff. And he shut it down. There was not one iota of dirt. There was not one tractor that moved. There was nothing. And he said, and this construction will not resume until you fulfill the minority contract requirements.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It was a game changer. Mm-hmm. It was a game changer because then it became the model for minority participation contracts in municipal places all over the country, and states and federal for that. But I credit Maynard Jackson for doing that. And so by the time I came to Delta, that had happened. They were still talking about it. Mm. And I would just smile, I'm just so proud. But if you have power and you don't use it for the good of the whole, you don't deserve to have it. Maynard Jackson is one of my heroes. To this day, he will always be my mayor. He will always be my mayor. See, people forget too, Maynard was a brilliant lawyer.
This is true.
He was a brilliant lawyer. A lot of people don't remember that. And so he combined his political savvy and the power that he held politically with his brilliant legal mind, so that when he came to the table, he wasn't bluffing. This is what's going to happen. This is why it's going to happen. And he knew he was on solid legal ground, because they would think, surely he's not going to shut down the airport construction. He's not going to do that. Mm-hmm. He is not going to do that. But he did.
He did. Mm-hmm. In 1990, you became the chief presiding judge of the Fulton County Juvenile Court. And with that, you became Georgia's first African American chief presiding judge of any state court.
That's right. And I caught hell. I caught hell. I just gonna be candid. Let's back up a step. See, I'd already gone through the fire. Because there had never been a black woman attorney for Delta Airlines.
Right.
When I went into that office, I was the highest ranking black woman, but not just the highest ranking black woman. I was the highest ranking woman of any color, Hispanic, Native American, whatever, worldwide. I was it. And I never lost a case because I showed up fully prepared every day. So to have been going through the fire, I've already been through the fire. I've already been tested. I've already been tested because after law school, there had never been a black person, man or woman, to be a clerk in federal district court here, anywhere in Georgia.
Right.
So this was not a new thing for me. And you are going to be the chief judge, and right? But I went in there for a purpose, because people thought I was crazy to leave Delta Airlines. Why would you leave this job?
It's cushy, it's comfortable, Fortune 250, all the things that come with it.
Right, and I'd never lost a case, so my ego was involved. You know, like I got this, right? And people would have given anything to have my position. Why would you leave that? Right? That was not my decision. Right? Listen, if it had been left up to me, I would have been at Delta Airlines. I would have retired from Delta Airlines. It was Judge Powell, who had been there for some 23 years, who passed. And a mentor came and said, Glenda, we've been meeting. We want you to apply. And I'm thinking, well, what? You know, I was polite. I didn't say that. And after the meeting, my dad, who I asked to come to the meeting, was my hero, never said, Glenda, what he thought I should do. He said, you need to pray about it first. And I've been very transparent about this. I did pray. It wasn't a sincere prayer. You know, it was like one of those rope prayers. Lord, what do you want me to do? Well, you don't really want me to give up much. You know how much money I'm making? How much stock options I have? You know, I mean, I had small children. I could fly anywhere around. I didn't know what a road trip was with little kids.
Right.
My life, I thought, was what it should be. And I aspired to become a senior vice president and to retire from that and to be on the board. That was what I aspired to be. That was God. God wrestled with me because those yo-yo prayers then got serious. I would wake up at night, I would sit rocking chair, my grandmother's rocking chair, I would just rock. And so the last day I applied for it and then I was appointed. So now, 63 people had applied for that position when I was appointed. So a lot of haters, a lot of people who didn't wish me well, outside and inside the courthouse, right? And so it was tough. It was tough, but I went there for a purpose. I went there to make systemic changes. I wanted to change the way we did juvenile court. I wanted to go back to the original mission of us rehabilitating children, not just locking them up. And then what do we do about the children who are abused and neglected? Why aren't we doing a better job of this? And so people always think about juvenile court as children who committed crimes. No, they're children who are abused and neglected, who've been all kinds of things, sexually assaulted, you name it, I saw it. And I will also say, I'm tearing up on this one, I'll also say that very early on, it was the first time I'd seen a child killed by a stepfather. It's the first, and I had only been on the bench just for a few weeks. And I went into the bathroom in my chambers on that porcelain, not even porcelain, it's not called porcelain, that ceramic sink, you know, and that cold tile. And if I close my eyes, I can feel it. I can feel my forehead on that sink and my knees on that hard, cold floor. And I said, God, I don't know if I can do this. You know, because I had just had the medical examiner in court testify. It was horrible how he beat that child to death. It was horrible. And the autopsy report, even a seasoned person who had been in the court for a long time literally ran out of the courtroom throwing up. And so I took a recess and I went in and I said, God, I just don't know if I can do this. I just don't know if I can do this. And I prayed and I said, God, please put an anchor in my back. Those were the words I used. I said, God, please give me what I need. Because then what I was in court for were his 3 siblings. And I said, God, I realize that I can't do anything for this child who's dead. But give me what I need for these 3 children. I hadn't thought about this in a long time. And so I prayed for an anchor in my back. I said, God, please just give me. I said, pray for a rod in my back, and for an anchor that I can do this work. And I know that when I got off my knees that day, I went back into that courtroom with a different kind of strength that God poured into me. Because had I not prayed that prayer, I doubt that I would have lasted 30 days in that job. And fast forward. Fast forward. He had been abused. The stepfather had been abused as a child. And so it's generational. And that's a very complicated story. But the bottom line of that is that it was the twins. There were 2 little boys and a little girl. It was the twins' 3rd birthday that day that they were in court when I went back and been on the bench. And anyway, I say all that to say that it took a different kind of strength for this work than it would have been in any other court. Superior court or state court or federal court or wherever. Because, I believe, and I do believe that is why God put on my heart to make this radical change. Because that's where I found my purpose and passion in that court. That I didn't find at Delta Airlines. I was winning millions of dollars lawsuits. I was this, I was that, I was doing this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, was it making a difference in children's lives and in their families' lives? And I do believe that is where, and I know with all certainty that is where I found my purpose and my passion, was in that court. And so years later, I'll run into somebody who's been in my courtroom, or just, let me tell you this, that, and the other. In fact, what I hope that people who listen to this and read the article might be inspired to get in touch with us, because what we're doing now is asking people to come back and tell me their stories.
Yes.
To tell me their stories. So I'm in CNN one night. This is before COVID, and I was running into CNN, and the guard said, "Oh, Judge, I'll help you." And he was escorting me in, and he said, "You won't remember me." And he said, "I was in your courtroom." And he said, "You told me if I came back in here, I wasn't going to go home." He said, "You gave me a chance, and I didn't take advantage of it, and you sent me to jail." He said, "But it changed my life because all of my crew, when I got out, had either been shot or were dead." Right?
Wow.
And he said, and none of them are still alive now that I'm older and look back on it, because they went their way and I would have done the same thing. He said, "So I'm going to tell you, my son's graduating from high school this year and he's going to college." I can tell you hundreds of stories. And so my point is that I know that that's where I was supposed to be, and that's where my purpose and passion intersect, and that's what I write about in that book, Purpose and Passion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as I'm all red-eyed and scared. Oh, I hadn't thought about the twins and their sister in a long, long time. So I have to tell you, too, that I had glass covering on my bench.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would come and bring me their school pictures.
Mm.
Every year until I left the bench, I would slide them under the glass. I would just slide them, take the other ones out, and I would slide them under the glass as a reminder, for me. Now, my mama was also working on this because, everybody in the court called my mama judge. Mama judge. I was like, I'm the chief judge. How is she down here giving all these orders? But you have to know my mother to appreciate this. So she went and found my secretary, told my secretary, she said, tell Glenda I need her credit card. And so June didn't even ask me. June just got my credit card out. My mother went and bought that same family a refrigerator.
Oh, wow.
She said, they needed a refrigerator, and so I just charged her your account, and then she would get them clothes, but my mother would do that with her families. I mean, she would, but that particular family, she said they needed a refrigerator because they needed to be able to move into this apartment, and they didn't have a refrigerator, so I'm thankful that I had that kind of support. I'm thankful that on the toughest days, I would take lunch break and just drive home and sit with my dad at the kitchen table and, get recharged and be able to go back to work. But out of all the things I've done, that has been, for me, I think that has really defined my purpose of what I was called to do, what I'm called to do. Am I going too long on these answers?
No, you're good. You're good. Speaking of purpose, I was a college student at Tennessee State University when.
I'm from Memphis. So
from Memphis. Listen. Memphis has a.
Yes, Tennessee State has it.
I love this. I just love it.
I was a college student at Tennessee State when I saw you on television for the first time.
Oh my.
And we used to gather around and watch the show. We would watch.
Thank you. I'm so touched by that.
And watch because we were just like, first of all, like just a badass black woman, like handling things on the.
I take that as the ultimate compliment.
With grace and dignity and power and strength, and you were able to weave all those things together, and we were just like, we would love to meet her one day. And 20 years later, here I am sitting with you. So
that touches my spirit.
I'm
it does.
Like,
thank you for sharing that.
No problem, because I know I'm just like wow, like yeah, if my homeboys and homegirls were here right now.
Well, you'll have to call them and you'll have to send it to them.
Will do.
You have to take a picture and say, look who I'm with.
Yeah. Full circle. Yeah, full circle. Remember when we were at Tennessee State? Well, look where I am today with her.
Exactly. So talk about, we talked about passion and purpose and meeting those two intersecting and joining together. How did those two things apply when you were A, approached for the show, and B, like when you taped 8 seasons, so obviously there was obviously a through line, right? So what was the what was that initial approach like?
Yes.
And then also like how were you able to weave your ethos, your moda operandi, your raison d'etre into the TV show?
Was it more than? Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Was it more than 8?
Well, we taped the 8 original sections, but it's still running.
It's still running.
Still running in syndication. Good point. Good point. Good point. With Sony, we taped 8 original, and then taping some more. That's a whole another conversation. So yes, what happened is that people had come to me before Sony came to me, and I wouldn't take the meetings. I'm like, that is just craziness on TV, right? It was, and I'm like, my attitude is, I'm a real judge. I've been a real judge, right? So, very important footnote. People think I left the bench to go do television. That is not what happened. I left the bench. I had never been a stay-at-home really mom with my children, and I really wanted to spend the summer with my son before he left to go to college. So he graduated that year in 1999, and I was planning to take the whole year off. So summer, get him to college, and then spend some time with my younger son. And then my plan was to take a year off and go back into corporate America to make money, because I need to send 2 children to college, right? And judges didn't make any money. I mean, we weren't even at 6 figures. It was just nothing, right? And I needed to do this differently, because by that time I was divorced. And anyway, it was just a different situation for me. So I was going to take that year off, and I announced April 1st, and my son's graduation was the middle of May, like May 15th, and they thought it was a joke. They thought, April Fool, come on, Judge, you're not leaving. But I was in a big fight. We don't have time going through all that, but I was in a big fight with the state and with the county, and you may remember, you're probably too young to remember this, I was on the front page of the AJC fighting with the governor because I didn't have a courthouse, and they were going to tear my courthouse down, right? So I had to wait until I had that money in hand for funding to get that courthouse you see over there now on Pryor Street. My blood is in those bricks. It was horrible. And so the governor was saying, she needs to be removed. She's not fit to be in the office, blah, blah, blah. It was horrible. And even some black people call me, you're never going to survive in this city. You don't cross the governor. You'll never get to be on the Supreme.
About that.
Yes. I mean, it was horrible. They were out to really, and there were some black people who were out to get me, right? And I just kept thinking, I know I'm right. I'm going to stand on principle. And literally, when I got evicted with no place to, I was doing court on the front steps of the courthouse because I didn't have a courthouse, right? It was horrible. It's horrible. That's a whole nother story for another time. And so it just got to be so ridiculous. I've lost my train of thought. What was I telling you about?
Television show.
Okay, television. Okay, so
yes.
so people think I left the court to go to do this. I didn't do that. I left, and I announced it April 1st because by that time I had the money and I had the architectural model that I could unveil. So I did that, and then I said, and it's time for me to go. And people, Judge, you're teasing, I called in my executive team first, because I have responsibility for the jail. They don't have that now. At probation, I had everything, right? As chief judge. Plus, I carried a full caseload.
Right.
It's crazy. So I called them in that morning, and they were just like, Judge, you just can't leave us. You can't leave us. And I said, I've taken you out to a very different place than where I found this court, right? And I said, it's time. I need to really focus on what I need to do for my own children now. And then we went out after they kind of regrouped. They were crying. It was just, and even the men on the team were just like, Lord, no, you can't do this. I went out and unveiled the model, and then told the team I was leaving. So now it's November. I get a call from a good buddy in Boston. She said, come on, Glenda, I'm calling in a favor. They know I know you, and I need you to take this meeting. Please take this meeting. I'm like, Nancy, I am not doing this. I don't want to do this. So fast forward, I took the meeting, and Sony said, what would it take to get you to do this? And I said, and did not blink, I said, I'd have to develop the show consistent with what I believe in. I said, I'd have to have this social workers, I'd have to have resources, I'd have to send them drug treatment or rehabilitation programs. And before I had that part of the conversation, they called in the president of Sony Television. And he came in and he sat right as close to me as you are. And he said, they told me they really want you to do this. And I want to know from you what it will take to get you to do it. What would it take you to say yes? So I outlined, just off the top of my head, I outlined everything I thought that would make sense. And he said, will you commit to doing the pilot? And I said, no, I have to go home and have a meeting with my children. So that was a Friday. Thanksgiving was the following Thursday. I was on a flight Friday, shot the pilot that weekend. That's how quickly it happened. That's how fast it happened.
Wow.
It happened that fast.
Wow. Wow. They were serious and you were serious.
Right.
Or they made sure that you were serious.
Right.
And then they responded in kind.
Right. And because they were expecting, frankly, here's Sony Television. They didn't have a court show. They wanted to be competitive. I mean, they were one of the big boys, right? And so they kind of expected that I would just kind of come in and think, oh, yes, thank you. And I said, no. I can't. It can't be scripted. I can't do this. I can't do the craziness. I will not do the craziness. And I was prepared to leave. I was really prepared to leave the meeting. My mama taught me a long time ago, the way you start is the way you finish.
That's right.
My mother used to tell me that. She used to always say that. And I didn't always understand when I was a kid, but it's true. So I had other judges years later, watch the show and say, oh, Judge, I wish I said, my mother told me that the way you start is how you finish. They couldn't go back now and expect their studios. I mean, what happened? So anyway, I was very apologetic at first and saying, oh, yes, but I'm not like the rest of them. Mine is different. And so, but then the reputation developed because then people saw what I was doing and saw it was different. And so I no longer had to apologize, you know? And so that's how it happened.
We're gonna move forward, as they say when you watch sporting events years after the fact.
Yes.
We will now move forward with the action.
Okie dokie.
On July 21st, I was sitting in Miami during the Delta outages, right? Right? And then news comes down about 1:30 that afternoon. Joe Biden, he's not going to run for president anymore.
Right.
And we're sitting out here, we're like, mind you, like, from me to you, and then 5 feet away is the beach, 15 feet away is the Atlantic Ocean. So I'm just like, nah, whatever. Really? And then everything just stops, right?
Yeah.
27 minutes later, word comes out, Kamala Harris has received the full and complete endorsement from Joe Biden, and she's gonna run for president. And that whole mood went from despair to now, let's get information.
Okay.
It's time. Let's do this.
From despair to joy.
Yes. When you found out, so where were you when that moment of time happened? And then what was your reaction?
In all honesty, I knew before the announcement was made. I can't tell you how I knew, but I had been told the night before that he was going to do it. So I wasn't shocked, but I will tell you I was saddened. I was absolutely saddened. I'm just being honest with you. I was very saddened by it. And the person who told me was credible, so I knew it was happening. You know, like some people would be like, oh, but I knew from this source that it was credible. So I was prepared in a way that I wouldn't have been prepared if I just turned on the news, right? So I was sad and frankly a little teary. And the reason being is because I had gotten to know Joe and Jill very well in 2008 because I was a surrogate for Barack and Joe, and I don't think I ever did the surrogate for Jill, but often for Michelle. So it's all over the country in OA. I mean, I was like going hard, right? All kinds of places. And so when people say, I know Joe, I can really say I know this man, and I know his heart, and I know his sense and dedication to service. So for me, he epitomized what a true servant leader is, meaning that he was committed to being a servant first in his positions of leadership. And he was literally selfless in that. So I was saddened. I didn't like the way, frankly, the Democratic Party had treated him. I didn't like the way people had pulled the rug from under him. I was like not happy about it. But he did what a lot of people wouldn't have done. He pivoted. And he said we must move forward. And so, I don't want to wake up the morning after this election like I did in 2016. I'm not going to do that again. And so I am doing what I can, because I don't want to look back and say I wish I had tried a little harder. And so I think it is a very interesting time. I think we are still dealing with issues. I know that we're still dealing with some very deep issues of racism and sexism in this country. But for me, in this election in 2024, I've said it a lot of times, democracy is on the ballot.
Right.
And if we don't get it right at this time, I don't know that we will recognize this country in another 4 years or 8 years or 12 years. Project 2025 is real. And that's just what they've written.
Exactly.
So if that's what they put on paper, what are they planning that they haven't talked about? And so I'm hoping that people will wake up, that they will be serious about this. I'm not asking people to do what I'm not doing, and that is to get out here encouraging people to register, to vote. Following up, I am now the co-chair of an organization. As I tell people, we're flying the plane as we're building this plane. I'm just committed to that. Just literally less than 48 hours ago.
Right.
And it's Peach State Women for Harris. Is my way of doing what I can, where I can, because I think it's important.
About 24 hours ago, the vice president issued, well, let me say it this way. She formally presented for the first time. She's had plans before, but this is the formal.
Right.
With the whole rollout, let's bring in Roland Martin, let's bring in the shade room, so we've got old, young, the whole thing. Plans for black men, plan for black America, right? The flagrant lies, the misogyny, the sexism that has come out, that has run rampant all over social media. A lot of it is not true, but the conversations are there, right? Historically, black men, second strongest voting bloc for the Democratic Party, first being black women.
You're right.
But the persistent, Chinese water torture of lies, disinformation, misinformation, misogyny, and sexism coming from a small but loud group of people. From where you sit and with your experience, what in the last 3 weeks, as we run through the tape, how should we combat and address what's being put out there in the ether and in the social media spaces?
See, we live in a different era. We really live in a very different era now that we have instant things that can just be popped out. Just instant. That didn't exist 50 years ago or even 40 years ago for that matter. And so there has to be a very sophisticated counter piece to what's being said. Now, I'm going to be candid with you, very, very candid with you again. I wish that this had happened on the front end of her announcement.
Yeah.
I'm just being real with you, because now what's happening is the campaign is in a reactive mode, damage control, which is what this is, right? But better late than never, right? Because this is real, and that block of voters is so critical. That block of voters. I studied what happened in 2016, and we as a people did not vote at the level that we had voted and supported Barack. It just didn't happen. And if we don't do that now, if that happens again, then we know what the outcome will be. But we've got an overlay, and there are men, black men, white men, Asian men, who do not think that a woman is capable of doing this job. And then you've got that, the overlay of racism.
Right.
Of a black person. We're still dealing with the backlash of Barack being president. Let's just call it what it is.
Let's just say it.
I mean, let's just talk about this, right? We haven't met before, but people who know me know I'm going to be very candid. And so what happened is that Make America Great, the MAGA movement, is code for we want to take the country back for it to be for white people. Right? So what you saw a candidate who made this horrible comments about people from Mexico. Mexicans are rapists and criminals. And all of a sudden the media just took off with that, right? And so I thought, oh wow, well, let's just double down. And so what about people from blank hole countries? And I mean, it just didn't stop. And what you saw really was an interview, CNN, of a woman who said, he's saying what I've been thinking. This is an upper class white woman. She said, no, he's really saying what I've been thinking. Because, wait a minute, they talk about the browning of America. They talk about how the demographics are going to change by 2040, 2050. And what does that mean for us? And so that's why we see all this divisiveness along racial lines, which is making this election even far more difficult. Right. And so we don't need black men to throw fuel on this fire that we're trying to contain and resolve. We need all hands on deck on this. So let me just say one other important footnote. I did a podcast for the National Coalition of 100 Black Women.
Yes, you did.
And I was asked, what do you say to a 40-year-old black man who says, it is my right but not my obligation to vote? I want to repeat what I said on that. I would say to that 40-year-old that it's not just about him. It's not just about you. It is about that young boy, that 40-year-old black man who didn't have what you had, who didn't have the opportunities that you had, that people who sacrificed for you to have it. See, that's what I keep getting people understanding. We can't get it twisted. I don't get caught up. In fact, people had this funny to say, but you're a celebrity. I don't think of myself as a celebrity. I just don't, because I am humbled by the fact that I know where I came from, right? And the shoulders I stand on and the responsibility that takes, that it's God's grace and these wonderful opportunities I've had. With those blessings, I then have a responsibility. And that's what I kept trying to get people to understand. It's not just about you. It is about what happens to us collectively as a people. And that is a problem. I wish I had an answer to tell you how we magically counter all this. I think that people just have to be truth sayers, as the old folk used to say. You got to be truth sayers, and you got to keep putting that out, because that is the only thing that's going to counter this hatred and these horrible lies, is the truth. And we can't be silent.
Right.
Can't be silent.
It's true. It's true. 2 more questions for you.
And I've been so long-winded, haven't I? Goodness.
No, you're good. I went to Woods Chapel Barbecue when you told the story about your son losing Kira Dixon Johnson, and in 2016. It's personal to me because my mother is a registered nurse, has delivered babies for more than 30 years. So, and I'm the oldest of 4 children, and with the youngest being a 30-year-old sister of mine. So it's very personal. So child care is very important and personal to me. We know the maternal mortality rates here in Georgia is beyond the basement.
It is.
It's horrible.
We've never been above 47 in the state.
Never.
Ranked in this nation. Never.
Mm-mm. Why was it paramount then, given the environment that we're in right now, where we have the assault on not only Roe, but the Republican Party masquerading itself as, we're pro-life, pro-family, except for when the baby is born and actually reaches. Why was it important to you to stand up and be counted in that moment then, and also going forward? What will you continue to do in order to fight that fight?
Right. I did not know when Kara died tragically, and legally she is my daughter-in-law, but as you know, I never referred to her as my daughter-in-law. She was and will always be my daughter. This is an amazing, gifted, brilliant, just a sweetheart, beautiful woman who walks into Cedars-Sinai, which is the world-renowned hospital.
Yes, it is.
And never walks out. I did not understand that these numbers were what they were, and that if you are black or brown, you're 3 to 4 times likely to die than a white woman going through the same situation. And so that's why we've been on this path. Why I spoke that day in the context of reproductive rights is that what we now know, and the projection is that we are anticipating seeing 1/3 more maternal deaths because women do not have access to abortion. And so there are women who will be forced to carry children to term. They may be ill, the baby may not be well, and maybe in states like Georgia where abortion is not readily accessible and don't have the funds to move out of state. So we're already in a horrible situation with so many women dying. And then if you talk about 1/3 of that being increased, then it's horrible. And so when you pair that with the fact that 84% of women who are dying because of maternal issues are preventable. Like Kira's death was absolutely preventable. They let her hemorrhage to death. And by the time they got her back into the OR, it was too late. They let her hemorrhage for more than 6 hours, right? I mean, it's just unfathomable, right? But my point is that the reason I had to stand there at that gathering is to raise my voice, to say that we have got to do it differently in this country. Mothers need to go home with their children, and we're going to continue to fight that fight. And what I have done, and it took a while, it took a long while, frankly, because Kara died in 2016, but I made the decision at the beginning of this year that I am actively taking on maternal death cases in legal cases in my law firm, in my new law firm. I couldn't do it before. It was too painful. It was too raw. It was just, I couldn't do it. And I'm not going to ever do anything that I can't take on and be effective in doing it, right? But I am there now. I've really prayed for strength, pray for direction on this. But until we are in situations where we're holding people more accountable, it is not going to get better. And Georgia, particularly, is just, I mean, the numbers here are, as you know, are just beyond horrific. And we can do better. We can do better. We live in the richest nation on the globe. But yet we have the worst. And that's just not black women and brown women. We're talking about all women. And so I'm not just concerned about black and brown women. I'm concerned about all women. And if we are seeing these numbers in this country when we have all the resources to do better, then why aren't we? Bit of good news. The Department of Health and Human Services, May of 23, opened an investigation into Cedars-Sinai. Now that's something we've been working on for a long time. Senator Cory Booker, who I am just so appreciative of, he said to me shortly after Kara died, he said, you know, Judge, it's not going to change until it's tied to funding.
Right.
And so they have opened up an investigation into Cedars-Sinai about the disparity in these deaths, and that could affect federal funding. And if that happens, then it'll be a domino, because all of these hospitals have to depend on federal funding. I don't care how rich or prominent they are, they all get federal funding.
Sure do.
And that's a game changer, which I hope and pray that will not be undermined. It's another reason why we have to have people in office who understand that, because that happened under Biden's administration.
Final question. What is one shred of advice that you want to give to Gen Z and millennials at this moment?
Yes. I have never been asked that question before. You're such a good interviewer. I have never been asked. I've been asked a zillion questions. I've done interviews at different places around the world. I have never been asked that question. And I'm so glad you did. I would say that it is important for them to know who they are. I mean, really know who they are and to whom they belong. I'm unapologetically a black woman who is grounded in my faith. But whatever that is for those people, they need to find that. And they need to know their history. Because if you don't appreciate that the fact that you got where you got, and you think you got there on your own, without an understanding of history and the people who made it possible for you to be there, I don't get that twisted. I have one grandmother who didn't even finish elementary school. The other grandma, my paternal grandmother, went to Spelman. But they both worked their whole lives as domestics because the world didn't value them. And so I don't get it twisted. I don't care if I'm at the White House. I don't care if I'm speaking in Germany. I don't care where I am. I am always cognizant of who I am and whose I am. I am. And that would be my advice, to be really clear about who you are. You know, to really reach into your soul and be authentic about it. People don't agree with me. I get that. I get that. But one thing you can say, I'm not a chameleon. I don't change with the wind. I do not change with the wind. You may not agree with me, but if I give you my word, you can stand on it. I'm not trying to duck and dodge and be all things to all people. I'm trying to be true to who I am and what I believe my purpose is in life. And so if you're authentic and you are clear about who you are and to whom you belong, then you ought to be able to stand on your purpose.
Absolutely.
You ought to be able to stand on it. But you can't stand on it unless you know who you are.
That's right.
Can't do it.
That's right.
So that would be my advice.
Counselor.
Yes.
I want to ask you, what is it like being in private practice? And then also, I have a follow-up question for you on the back end.
Sure. Well, it's really interesting. I'm practicing with Chris Stewart, who is long considered me his second mother. Justin Miller is in Stuart Miller. Justin Miller, I've known since he was 15 years old, because I had a regulation basketball with the lines and everything painted in my turned around driveway. So all the kids came to my house, right? So I've known Justin forever. And then Madeline, I didn't know Simmons, but have gotten to know her. And for me, it is an opportunity for me to do what I really love, and that is be in court in front of a jury on cases and go to mediation and all of that. And it's kind of interesting because when I show up in court, it's like, wow. A quick story, I was striking a jury for my son when I had my own law firm, and he was an associate there, and the jury pool and the opposing counsel, I was just stepping in for my son because he's out of town, just to strike the jury, and the opposing counsel says, anybody know this woman? And everybody started laughing. Everyone's like, yeah, that's Judge Hatchett, except for one woman who I think was hard of hearing, didn't understand what was going on. And this young man raises his hand, late 20s. He says, I'm going to tell you right now, anything she say, I'm going to believe it. And I'm thinking, don't say that. I really need you on this jury. So I take that as a great compliment. And I'll tell you why, because I've worked hard to protect my reputation. My dad used to say, your word is your bond, and that your name is important. Right? And that is so true in my life. It is who I am and who I want to protect at all costs. Could I have taken some shortcuts? Yes. Could I have done things differently? Yes. But I've chosen to do it this way. So at this point in my life, I'm happy to be of counsel here with these young lawyers, and they pop their head in my door from time to time. But this is what I love. The problem is that people don't think I practice law. It's like, oh, Judge Hatchett, because they've seen me. When you figure this season, I literally started TV in 2000. So, I've been on TV for 24 years, right? And then more recently with another show. And so my point is that it is a challenge, though, that people say, but she's a judge, she's not really a lawyer. I'm a hell of a lawyer. I really am a really good lawyer. So that is what I'm glad to be doing. Now people say, well, do you miss being on the bench? Interestingly, I was a litigator before I went to be a judge, so it's kind of interesting to be back on this side.
This side
of the bench.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm very happy. And we take cases all over the country, not just in Atlanta or Georgia. We take cases all over the country. And they've been supportive of me wanting to do the maternal death cases, so that's a lot of what I'm going to be focusing on.
And then this is a question, because when I'm not interviewing people or photographing people, I cover the Georgia State Capitol.
Ooh.
And wow. Cover the legislature.
Yes.
And, I've got stories. Those bottles of liquor right there.
Right?
Yeah. We'd be
dousing them down, right?
Yes.
We'd be guzzling them down.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to, my best friend, I guess, is State Representative Darshawn Kendrick, and her district also includes portions of Rockdale County.
Yes.
And it's also has been affected by the biolab disaster.
Right.
And we had a gentleman who testified on her committee last week.
That was so tragic. Oh God.
Untimely. Our thoughts and prayers and support go to him.
Oh, and yes, that was so tragic. I mean, he just had testified, and then a few minutes later, he's collapsed.
He's collapsed, and it's just like, it's just not fair. It's just not right.
Oh my God.
It also speaks to, when we say deregulation, what we really mean is the reduction of rules. That's all we're saying.
A good way to put that.
It's a reduction of rules. That's what deregulation is. So, I wanted to ask you, I know the firm has been on the case, so I'm not going to ask you to comment, but...
No, I can comment.
Okay.
I can comment on that, yeah. Okay. No, I'm pleased to tell you that our law firm filed a class action suit in federal court, Northern District of Georgia. We have engaged a law firm that specializes in toxic chemical cases. And so we are very committed and telling people to call to see what we can do and how we can help them. Because the explosion of people who had to leave their homes, they had to move out from the explosion, but also the people think about who can't go to work, who've not been able to go to work, business owners, but also their employees who are depending on those paychecks, and those employers who are depending on being open so they can pay their employers. And so it has such a rippling effect for people. We have people who've had chronic breathing issues and burning eyes and skin irritations, and the list goes on. And we don't really know the full impact of this yet. We just don't know yet. But we are going to be on the front line of this and hopefully getting people the justice that they need. That's what we're fighting for.